Hey Rob.
Hey,
Thing is, I had to clean off my camera.
uh, was a little fuzzy looking.
I'm I'm like using a suggestion from Matt Zed from a long time ago where he said like he would use stickers from fruit.
Oh,
But over time it gets
yeah,
not
it's
look
got to
good.
leave some residue.
Yeah. Well, no, his thing was like it shouldn't leave residue because it's like put on fruit, but I think over time it just gets gross anyways.
Yeah.
Are we do you know who we're expecting?
Nope.
Oh, just usually Gretchen shows up.
Yeah, and Sarah's been showing up the last few,
Cool.
but I think she's also coming to the Code for SF night, so she might be scheduled for that. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I figured just wait a few minutes and see.
Okay. Yeah, I just came. We could probably end early if it's just the two of us. But I just coming here to stay updated on things.
Yeah. I don't know that there's any major changes. I think Sarah's partway through refactoring the getting rid of the assigned pages view and all the stuff associated with it.
Yeah, I I'm not sure if it's helpful, but I was thinking about that because I wrote it. It's so bad. Well, because I mean, I was thinking about it because the reason why it's kind of gnarly is because we never implemented like a state management, something like Redux, and that was, and so it was all the spaghetti code to try to, keep track of that value, whether they're looking at a signed page or all pages. Um, does that ring a bell?
Yeah, I mean, it probably could have been executed slightly better with something like Redux or with other patterns, but either way, it adds a lot of complexity. And I think the big thing is that that way of choosing assigned pages no longer matches how we generate the spreadsheets, like at
Uh,
all.
yeah,
So, so it's not even like there'd be some relative, like at the time, the idea was like, this is basically the same as the spreadsheets and you could just switch over here.
mhm.
But that's no longer even vaguely similar.
What do they do? I guess I haven't I, I haven't been um, keeping track of how the analysts work. So how does the like tasking work nowadays?
So the sheets are now broken up by a series of multiple tags and not by domain. Um, yeah. And then uh, they are further sort of filtered based on the automated analysis priority stuff, which is complicated because what it does now is it looks over just the past 7 days and tries to add up and figure out the overall like priority and diff hashes and everything else for that 7 day period,
Mhm.
which is a lot more complicated than anything we ever did in the app for that. And then it does a bunch of sorting based on that. So it attempts
Okay.
to group things by text hash and source diff hash, and then sort those groups by their priority, like whatever group has the highest priority value in it somewhere, like winds up at the top. I'm not even sure that that is like the perfect mechanism of doing it, but like that's how it's done now. It's just like vastly, vastly more work than anything that happens in the app. And I'm not sure. Like I think reproducing that in the UI is something we could do, but would take a lot of work. Because I mean, it takes us 18 minutes to do that. Uh, now that I made those database improvements, like a week ago, it was taking, an hour and a half. Um,
Nice.
So, but it's still like it's not a process that you could just run on the fly in the app when you load data like we currently do.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking not to implement Redux, but I know like React came out with context, which is kind of supposed to be their built-in way to kind of track state. So I wasn't sure if keeping that in mind would have been helpful in refactoring, but from what you're saying, it's not. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not so much an issue of like the code was complicated, because if that was the only problem, like we could work on finding cleaner ways to do what it did.
Mhm.
But it's that it was complicated. It adds a part of the app that nobody's using, and the way that it, like the end result no longer matches the end result that is what analysts are using as the state of the art. So it's also like it wouldn't be relevant just to clean the code up.
Okay, cool. That's good to know.
Yeah, because I think I'd left it alone for so long because that's how I was thinking of it. And then when I had mentioned like, oh, this is an extra thing that nobody's using and we did a long time ago and we want to get people transitioned over to it, when I was talking with Sarah at one point, and I was like, oh yeah, but it really no longer matches what they do, so I don't even know. This might not really be relevant at all.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I saw a message from Dan saying he'll be a little late.
Oh, okay.
Do you know if the analysts or everybody, the last time I was at this meeting, everybody seemed excited about the public database, like important changes kind of database. Do you know what's the movement on that? Or
So yesterday they um, Gretchen sort of proposed a little bit of a possible work plan. Um, and I don't know. It sort of seems like it's still in the stage of thinking through, uh, probably to execute on it, and then how. Um, so still seems somewhat a little bit vague.
Mhm. I mean, for me, I think I don't know. I really like the idea because in my mind, at least, it seems like just a stripped down version of what we have right now that's just browsable and a much smaller subset of things to look through.
Hmm.
When I was showing, I remember when I was at the Internet Archive and I was showing somebody Scanner, and I was just trying to find like a good example because it's just really hard to find like a good example. And then when I did find something, they're just like, "Why are you showing this change? This doesn't seem significant." I was just like, "That's not the point right now." But we had this like database of all these important changes, and to show somebody that, it would be a lot more impactful.
Yeah, when I'm demoing it, I usually start with like an actual generated sheet and start
Mm,
clicking on high priority ones.
that makes sense.
Because yeah, I agree. the the app gives you no useful tools to start in and like find something worth looking at. It just gives
Hmm.
you things that have changed.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, we already know that 95% of those are like,
Yeah.
who cares? Um, yeah, the thing. I mean, I agree. I really like the idea of it. The thing I struggle with about it is, I have very little. I'm not super excited about executing it in the way that we've executed the app, which is to say, like, we could totally build it really similarly, but I don't really want to build it with React because I don't really like React for websites. Um,
Wait. So what would you? not a website, so it wouldn't be a website. What would it be instead?
Like it could still be web content, but I guess like on the like the long, very smooth continuum from like site to like application,
Mm.
I feel like React is only a good fit like
Oh,
way out here.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It has a whole bunch of costs that come with it if
yeah,
you're anywhere in like this entire half of that spectrum.
yeah.
And the thing that I feel like that important changes site should be in being a easy to access, publicly informative thing
Hmm.
uh, is more of a site and less of an application.
That makes sense.
Um, and so, like, I don't want it to be a thing that totally fails for people who don't have JavaScript, or if JavaScript doesn't load, and a thing that takes literally like half a megabyte of JavaScript to
Yeah,
run.
yeah.
Um,
So
you know,
we can't just fork UI or whatever.
yeah. I mean, we could. That would be the quick way to do it. Um, it's just like I feel like I feel like that's not the ideal result.
Hmm.
Um, so
What?
from a technical perspective, I sit here and I go like, oh, if I did it the way I want to do it,
Just what?
it's probably a fair amount of work.
Oh, okay. It's not like a static generated site using, was it Jenkins or Hugo or whatever it was.
I mean, I think you could totally build a static site from it or for it. The part that is tough there is, I mean, it's not just like, hey, I got some markdown files that a static site generator knows how to use. Like it will probably be partially that.
Yeah.
But then you have to like build the whole thing to go suck all the important changes out of the sheet, and then suck all the matching things out of the database and out of the
Oh,
differ and everything else.
I was thinking, yeah, I was thinking it was just like we would aggregate what we have so far and important changes see, but I guess you're imagining that as they add things to the important changes, it would update.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be a dynamic backend. It could still be a static site. It's just that your build script has to go do all the stuff that you would otherwise do at runtime, right? So it has to go out to that sheet and pull down the latest stuff
Yeah,
because that sheet should always be changing.
yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a lot more complicated. In my head, it was more like kind of not brochure, but it was just like here's kind of what we've done so far. But you're right. If it's like constantly updating of what we're adding to it, that it's a lot more complicated than what I was imagining. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem really great if it's extra work to like add the next 5 rows that got added to that sheet to the site.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Oh, I heard that you were able to go to a Friday lunch at the Internet Archive.
Oh yeah, I went last week.
How was that?
It was good. I don't know. I spent some time talking with one of the Wayback engineers about some stuff he was working on for generating statistics about what they're capturing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which, when that goes live, will be super useful for us. Because it wouldn't like the health check does, but it would probably be a much richer thing for us to try and monitor than the way that the health check looks at it. So we could sort of check every day or every week and say like, how many bytes is it archiving for us? How many pages is it archiving for us?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we saw that fluctuate or not fluctuate in the way we expect it to, like that's a good signal for things.
Yeah, because the health check
Um,
like
oh,
random
sorry.
things. The health check is just like find 10 random things and just see how they. Okay.
Yeah, it's basically just like pick 10 random things from the 10 random pages from the database and see if they've been snapshotted by the Internet Archive at least once in the last 3 days, I think.
Mhm.
You know, which works, although it seems like since we sent them the last update in May, a bunch of things stopped updating and a bunch of things never got added. So there's some weirdness, which I have inquired about but haven't heard back on. So I've wound up adding a lot more stuff to our like Save Page Now automation, which is not ideal, but that's a stopgap. Anyway, but so I had some super interesting conversations about that statistics stuff, and learned a bunch of things about the tools they have that are focused around their like items and resources API, which probably is unlikely to be directly helpful to us in the short term, because basically they have like a set of APIs that are focused around like Wayback and dealing with mementos or captures and stuff. So there's like CDX that we use and the Memento API that we use. And then there's also like TimeGate and TimeMap that we don't use, and a newer version of CDX that I would like to use, but need to finish the current stuff before I try and rewrite it to use their new one. Because the new one's slightly different. Paging works differently. It's just a big thing. So it's not straightforward. You can't just like flip the endpoints.
Yeah.
Right. So there's like all that stuff that talks about URLs and snapshots of pages. That's fairly straightforward if you're trying to deal with web content. And then there's all the other APIs that deal with like items that are in the archive. And in that world, like web content is the same kind of thing, more or less, as like MP3s they have in the sound archive, and like images of CD-ROMs and other things and all that kind of other things that are in the archive, or like ebooks or whatever. But the way that web pages get represented as like another item or like thing entry in the archive is as works, which are like the giant archives. So like a work has like several gigabytes worth of web page snapshots in it, right? And it represents some time frame across some series of domains.
It has several gigs of what in it?
Of snapshots of captures of web pages.
Jeez.
So everything gets like shoved into this giant work archive until like it's big enough that like that's a good chunk. It's done and like gets set aside, and then a new one sort of starts and agglomerates stuff into it. In each of the different sort of like crawlers and monitors and things they have running, each sort of has a work that it's building up. So there's all these archives that are the items in the archive collection.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're looking at the like page by page URL thing, that's a whole different system of stuff that gets built every week by opening up all the archives that have been finished up until then, and like indexing everything. And then like shoving it into the search system that CDX runs through. And then whenever you request a web page, there's this crazy system that goes and like figures out whichever like work file that corresponded to and what byte offset in that work file, and then scans through it and then gives you back that little slice.
Wow.
And so like if we could access the relevant works, we could probably do things faster because we could just download a giant bulk pile of data. Mm-hmm. And we would have slightly richer data to work with, only very slightly. But the downside, a lot of the works are not open for public access, because if you just had the work, they wouldn't be able to restrict any of their other business policies about like some pages are restricted access, or maybe they were blocked by robots, so they're in the work but the archive won't serve them to you. And blocked by robots, they apply differently depending on whether it's like a government web page or like some giant corporate entity or like just person X's web page. Like they apply those policies differently. And if you have the work, you can just bypass whatever policies they have. So the works are not always open access. Plus, if we just download the works that are like for Edgy Monitor, which is the system. Hey, Dan.
Hey.
Which is the system that's doing the crawling specifically for us, we wouldn't get snapshots that other crawls are making of the same pages that we care about. People make through Save Page Now. So at the end of the day, in terms of like loading page data, thinking about it, plus their like senior guy has said to me once or twice, like, no, what you're doing is with CDX is probably right. Like you could load bulk data from works, but it would be more of a mess for what you want to do, which is say like, what's all the data the archive has about this page and this page and this page, because you'd have a hell of a time finding all the relevant works for that. And so CDX really is the right solution, even though it results in you making like a boatload of internet requests to our APIs. Yeah. It's still probably the more right way for you to answer the question than trying to download a whole bunch of 8 gigabyte files every day, like a raft of like 100 8 gigabyte files, and then opening those up and scanning through them.
Rob's just updating me on stuff he learned from the Internet Archive when he went there last week.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So so we were just going through like why we would or wouldn't want to like download raw works from the archive.
Got it.
Despite the like usage policies that make it hard for us to do so, also probably wouldn't actually be the right solution in the end.
I see. So CDX makes it easier, I'm getting from context, to like ask for the marginal changes since the last time you were there cheaply.
Yeah. And to focus on like particular URLs, because works, like every crawler and monitor and thing that's like shoving stuff into Wayback is building its own work, and then the work winds up as like an entity in the archive that you can maybe access later.
What is the scope of a work in IA? It's really hard to get from reading what that is.
I think it is fairly dependent on the particular crawler. Okay. And there are multiple crawlers that are like implementations of the same thing, and then there are multiple different things also. And so there's varying behaviors across all of those as to how they build works. That's my understanding. And then, so like one of the issues is like, hey, if you want to know all the things that Wayback has about like epa.gov/state local energy/index.html, you'd have to open up like every freaking work that you can find that covers a time period you care about.
I see. Yeah.
And see, like, because many of them may have a snapshot of that page, or none of them.
CDX is indexing that for you.
Yeah, and so basically CDX, every week they rebuild the CDX index from all their works. And then they have like a delta index. So whenever you do a search, it searches the delta index and then the weekly index. And so the delta index is just live updating for most things. So whenever a crawler puts something in its work, it also pokes the delta index infrastructure and says like, hey, I have this and this work over here. So you can get it from this incomplete set of data.
That's good to have a better sense of the internals there. That's cool.
Yeah. So that's that.
Sorry to be super late. We have a bunch of organizational restructuring drama, so it was not a meeting I could bow out of. But
no worries. We apparently found enough to talk about that took up 20 minutes. So
yeah, that's good. My only thing is I put in the minutes, just going to press on that Elastic PR when I get another hour or two to focus on it. But the comments, cool. So
sounds good. I spent a lot of time yesterday working my way through trying to get a little bit farther on actually cleaning up the Wayback import stuff. So I'm hoping I'll keep finding time to work on it this week, and maybe I'll have it done enough to be like, hey Dan, please review this giant monster PR.
Yeah, okay. I can do that.
Hopefully by the end of the week, but
long weekend, so that's good.
Yeah, Yeah, and then I guess I need to make those pagination updates. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. That's kind of it for me. I think with the pagination, I may be going to go with 3.1, which is adding the query arg for it instead of a different endpoint for it, just because at this point that feels like an easier transition.
Yeah, that's fine. I think there's good arguments for it. My first impulse was definitely, I think, your first impulse of make people go out of their way to do the expensive thing.
Mm-hmm.
But as a change from where we are now, maybe query parameters are better, more graceful to motion. So
yeah, I don't know. I think there's always room to change it later, and like
yeah,
the first shift is adding the feature, whatever it is,
right.
and it'll be opt out, and then we have to switch everything that's using it to explicitly use it, and then we can switch it to opt in.
Right.
And then it'll be easier to change to another endpoint or whatever later if we want to. So.
Do the deprecation cycle dance.
Oh yeah. All right. So I guess that's it.
Cool.
Thanks for answering my questions, Rob. I was enlightening to learn about some of the stuff about the important changes.
Yeah, no problem.
How are you, Kevin? Things good?
Yeah, it's gnarly. Doing a lot of gnarly in a good way. Like
Oh,
after the DWeb conference, there's going to be a lot of travel. So we have our in-person meeting, and I'm going to our networks to help continue like connecting with people that are dealing in like mesh network, local area network space.
neat.
And then there's another IA is having like another thing that they invited me to at the end of September. And then we have data together in New York in mid-October. So like the next month and a half is just going back and forth a bunch of places.
Yeah.
But it's really I'm working on this project with Kelsey, connecting people from S2AC, the Science to Action group, with ESIP, the Earth Science Information Partners, and PEGI, the like this conglomerate of archivists and librarians. So we're all meeting next week at ESIP's data stewardship, um, like online meeting, just introducing ourselves and just connecting all these people. And I talked to so I'm like getting all these people from like the climate scientists to the earth science providers to like the archivists to just get to know each other. And
Yeah.
then I talked to Kelsey's been talking to this new person over at Protocol Labs, who's working on Filecoin, but he's super interested in the library and archive space. He wants to explore those areas for use cases. So hopefully he can come to the meeting and also the Data Together meeting later in October. But I also talked to Megahertz, Michelle, over at Protocol Labs last week. So they're slowly getting everybody. It's been taking a while, but we might be able to get all these groups together in one space.
That's a really cool long-term project. Like all these independent things that were given a jolt of either panic or money or motivation about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And we all started just running independently, right?
Yeah. And so I don't know, for me personally, I just, this is where I'm most excited about. So
yeah. That's great.
But it's tiring.
I bet.
Yeah, it's very emotionally draining because there's all this baggage. A lot of people carry baggage from the past, so it's trying to respect that and not like dredge up old memories, old ghosts or whatever.
Yeah.
So approaching things delicately is emotionally draining.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's all working out.
That's good.
Good.
Well, I might go see about some lunch, fellas.
Yeah.
All right.
Take care. It's good seeing everybody.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Bye.